different one rather than two separate videos. I'm going to show you guys how to make a cuffed cardigan and also a oversized cardigan. If you're interested in making the oversized cardigan, then personally what I used was a 6mm crochet hook. I also did 21 rows. I recommend using a 6, 7, or an 8. Honestly, the bigger the better, because that means it's less rows and way more length. This cardigan was about 29 or 30 inches, almost 3 feet if you guys are wondering. However, when it comes to making cuffed cardigans, I prefer to use a 5mm hook, mostly because I like when it's shorter. But you're free to do whatever you want. I've created this sizing chart, and from the feedback I've gotten, it seems to be very accurate. I've made a large and an extra large, and I got really good feedback for both, so I can guarantee that this is very accurate. I already finished like half of it already, and I don't know how to do the cuffs attached to it. I was having a hard time, so I always do it separately and then I sew it on, and I'm going to show you how I do that. And also these 3 rows that are for the back, and also like how to attach the sleeves. It's a very easy project, very beginner friendly, and usually this takes me like 2 days to finish, so it could be more or less for you, but it is a very easy project overall. I'm going to be using a 5mm hook, and also this color is called Spring Green by Red Heart Yarn. I'm actually going to be using 2.5 skeins. Like I said before, this color is called Spring Green, and I'm using a 5mm hook. I'm going to start with a magic circle because I do not like chain 4s. I hate the little gap that it makes, and I haven't figured out how to make the gap disappear. So in order to make a magic circle, you just put your fingers like a gun and then yarn over until you see an X on the bottom of your fingers. Then when you turn it, there's 2 lines. Go underneath, grab bottom, and twist. Grab your working yarn and chain 2. This will count as our first double crochet, and we're going to do 2. So this is our first double crochet, and this is our second double crochet. And now we're going to chain 1. A set of 3 double crochets are called clusters, so we're going to do 6 clusters total. If you've done a granny square before, then making a hexagon will be so easy. Instead of 4, you're actually doing 6. Please make sure that like before you move on to like your second row that you have 6, because I remember the first time I ever made a cardigan, one side was perfect and then the other side I accidentally did 7 sides, and I noticed right at the end when the sleeves weren't lining up. So I advise you to make sure that you have 6 clusters before you move on to avoid that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 more. You can also pull it as you go. We have our 6 clusters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to chain 1 and slip stitch into this very first stitch, and then slip stitch again, and 1 more time. Okay, so now we're going to flip it and tie this close so it doesn't bother us. And then I just tie it. So now it's secured, and this is how it should look like. We're going to chain 2, and this one counts as our first double crochet, and we're going to make 2 clusters in each hole because these are going to be our corners. So 1, 2, 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and then the same thing, 2 clusters in each side. And I will be back when I finish this and we go to the 3rd row. So we're going to chain 1 and slip stitch 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2, again 2 clusters in this hole. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. This is where I mean that it gets different. We're not going to do 2 clusters in one hole anymore. Here, we're only going to do 1 because this is not a corner. We only do 2 clusters in corners. So this one, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and so on and so forth. So 1 cluster, chain 1, 2 clusters. And then so on and so forth. I'm doing a size medium, so I'm going to do 15 rows total and then come back for the sleeve part. But if you're doing a smaller size or a bigger size, look back at the measurement chart I put up earlier and you can go off by that. This is my 14th row and I'm going to start my 15th row. I'm going to slip stitch 3 times like we've been doing. And then this is where things are going to change. Instead of doing 2 clusters, we're only going to do 1 because when we connect our sleeve, this is where one of the clusters will go and it will just complete the 2 clusters later on. So I like to put a stitch marker to keep track of it. And for this row, we are not going to do the full 6 sides. We're only going to do 4 sides. So count 1 side, 2 side, 3 side, and then 4 side. And then this is where I put my other stitch marker to also keep track. So I'm going to come back when I am over here. I just finished my 15th row and now we're going to fold it. This is honestly the trickiest part out of the whole thing. And I vividly remember when I first learned how to make one, this was the part that like really got me and I had to rewatch the video a million times. So I'm going to do my best to explain it very thoroughly so you're not struggling like I did. So if you were to go on the side where you put your last stitch marker in your working harness, if you take this side and you fold it, it would be wrong. And the reason this is wrong is because our next step is to make a sleeve. And this is not going with the direction of the sleeve. This is actually going to go this way and then downward, which will actually be closing this off and you will not be able to get in. So the correct way to fold it, or a way I found the easiest to fold, is by marking the start and end and essentially making those sides kiss. So this little flap, you're going to put it over and you're going to make the stitch markers kiss, and then we're going to take the corner and the other corner, and we're going to have this weird little shape. So now we're going to take our working yarn and we're going to fold it again to make the L. And this is the best way I can explain how to fold it. So we're going to attach this together and then expand to a sleeve. And guess what? This part will not be closed off. I just took my stitch markers off, and this is how we're going to attach the sleeves. So this little chain, we're going to put our hook inside, and we're going to pull our yarn under and slip stitch. This connects both sides, and now we're going to do a cluster. Notice how I only made one cluster is because you get to do the other cluster later on. So now we're going to put our hook underneath the hole, slip stitch, and then cluster. Take our hook, go underneath, slip stitch, and then cluster. And then this is what we're going to do until we reach the end. I am almost at the end, and we're going to, again, one cluster. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and this is where we're going to attach it in the first stitch. And this is how our sleeve should look like, very discreet. And now we're going to make our sleeve. So we're going to chain 2 and then make 1 cluster, and then chain 1, and then 1 cluster, and then chain 1, and so on and so forth. Since again I'm doing a size medium, I'm only going to be doing 10 rows for the sleeves, and then 2 half double crochet rows, 1 just to like round up the edges, and then the other one to decrease and prep for the cuff. I finished my 10 rows for my sleeve, and now we're going to slip stitch and make 1 row of half double crochets. This row is just going to be a simple normal row, no increasing, no decreasing. We're only going to decrease on the next row, and I'm going to come back when I finish this row. I thought I was recording the decreasing row this entire time, but it's okay, I'm going to show you guys anyways. So we're going to make 1 half double crochet, and then we're going to make another one, right? But we're not going to close it. We're actually going to go to the second stitch, and then that's when we close it, and that is how you decrease. So we're going to make 1, and then 1 and 2, and then 1, and then there's no more because that's where the row ends, and then we just slip stitch. You can always leave it out like this if you want. I've seen it like this, but notice like how significantly smaller it is. You can also do 3 decreases instead of 2, and usually after I finish this part I flip it inside out so it's ready for when I do the cuff part. To start the cuff, we're going to make a slip knot and then chain 11. If you're using a bigger or a smaller hook size than what I'm using, which is a 5, just make sure it's 2 inches or any other length that you want. We're going to make half double crochets. We're essentially making a rib stitch, which is basically like a mini beanie. My wrist size is 6 inches, but I have found it that making all my cuffs 8 inches is very accommodating for large and extra large. So ever since, I've always been making my cuffs 8 inches because 7 inches is a little bit snug, So I just find that 8 inches is a little bit big and really comfortable, and it slides in, slides out. So for the second row, we're only going to make half double crochets on the back loop only, and we're going to continue this for 16 or 17 rows, which is 8 inches. My cuff is finished and I'm going to sew it together. I've never seen anyone do this before, but I like to do it because I like when it's one strand. Also, it doesn't like go away in the middle of when you're doing it. I've seen people do it 2 strands, but I don't like it. It's sort of thick and I just do not like it. So I just do that so it stays in place and it's also one strand. So we're going to sew it. Usually I just do a whip stitch. You can do any stitch that you're comfortable with. Going to attach this and like make a few other knots as well. And then I just cut it off so it's not in the way. I like to completely lay it flat and just hold it like a sandwich, and then I just, again, normal whip stitch, and then you're basically doing this until like you reach the end, and then you just flip it inside out, and then I will come back when my cuff is finished. Sometimes this happens where like the sleeve part is a little bit bigger than the cuff part, so what I do is I fold it and then I just make 2 stitches essentially in the same hole, and that is just what I do, or you can just do more decreasing. So anyways, we're going to make a couple knots and then we're going to okay. So now we're going to flip it inside out. And there you go, there's your sleeve. It's really discreet. I do this all the time, and like you can't even tell that is sewn. Well, maybe a little bit, but there's no holes, no nothing, and it's just perfect. I'm gonna show you guys how to make these 3 rows in a few minutes, but when you're going to make that part, please lay it down and make sure that like this part is going in the inside and you're not doing both this side, because it will not line up. So what I do is like I open up like this, and then I just pinch here, and then I just start it, and then so on and so forth, and then I just like put them next to each other to make sure. Made a slip stitch and the hook, and now we're going to go inside this little hole and chain 2, 1 and 2, and then we're just going to do clusters. 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, chain 1, and then 1 cluster, and then chain 1 all the way to the end, and then I'm going to flip it and show you guys how to do the second row. I've reached the end and I did not go through this little hole over here. I just stopped over here in this corner. So we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and then make 1 cluster. And if you want to add more length on the bottom, this is exactly how you do it. And you just do however many rows you want, and then when we reach over here, we're going to do 1 cluster inside of here. And I'm going to show that when I reach the end of this row. Usually I do 3 rows for the back. I feel like that's the most accommodating amount. It has worked well for bigger sizes, and it also works well for smaller sizes, so I feel like 3 is the magic number for this. Okay, so I reached the end of my second row, and I'm going to do a double crochet and then chain 2, flip my work, and then again cluster and then so on and so forth. But for this part, we're only doing 3 rows, and this is our last row. All right, so both sides are finished, and now we're going to assemble these two. So make sure that you're assembling from the inside and not the outside. And same for the cuff. We're gonna do the same thing over here. And we're almost done. You can add a ribbed stitch on the edge, or just 1 row of half double crochet, which is what I usually do. And this is pretty much like our last step. And yeah, I'm just going to finish this up and then do 1 row of half double crochet. I'm going to show you how I discreetly hide this. What I do is I put my hook underneath. Keep in mind that this is the inside and not the outside, and I actually unravel this and I split it into 2, and then I just put my hook underneath, and then I just tie it a couple times, and it makes a very tiny, very discreet knot that like you won't be able to tell. I do this when I make my crochet bucket hats, and you can't even tell, like, and I don't know. So this is just a method that I'm comfortable with, just so there's not like a big bulk of knots. Now I'm going to make my final row of half double crochet. I usually do this to like soften it up, and make sure that when you're doing this part that you're doing it in the back side, so like when you're doing the half double crochet row, it's not like backwards, if that makes sense. So I usually just kind of like put 1. I don't like to put 2 or 3 over here because it kind of like makes it bulky and doesn't like square it up. So in all of these I only put 1, and now this is a corner, so I'm actually going to put 3 in here just to round up that corner, and then inside this hole, and then you just do the half double crochets on the stitches sticking out. But that's pretty much what I do over here, nothing too crazy. And now I just continue doing half double crochets like normal, and then when I get to the corners I usually do 4 double crochets. I do 2, then chain 1, and then 2, and then I just keep going. I'm going to add that in just in case. So I just reached the corner, and inside this hole I'm going to do 2 half double crochets, chain 1, 2 half double crochets. So here's my 2 half double crochets. Now we're going to chain 1 and then 2 more, and that's about it. And then you just keep going until you reach the end. And if you're not sure how to do this on the other side, just rewatch this part because it's gonna be the same thing. This is what I mean by like it gives a softer and squared look. I really like this, and it's also extremely comfortable. And also like the stitch is facing us and it's not backward. This is also how the corner looks, and I really love how this turned out. This is the finished result. I really like it. I love this color. It's so vibrant. It doesn't look vibrant in camera, but trust me, it's very, very vibrant. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed.